Split Happens. It's our new podcast, and this is episode 1, and it's all about divorce, custody, and family law. We're guiding you through the principles to make it easier.
I'm Jay Henderlight. I'm a board-certified marital and family law attorney. This is episode 1, How to Win at Divorce.
Split Happens, a podcast sponsored by Sasso Guerrero and Henderlight, explores the emotional and legal challenges of divorce, offering insight and real-world advice to help families navigate change with clarity, compassion, and resilience.
Hello, everybody. I'm meteorologist Katie Garner here at News4Jax, and this is...
I am Jay Henderlight. I am a board-certified marital and family law attorney at Sasso Guerrero and Henderlight. I am not Katie's divorce attorney yet.
Thank God. But I'll tell you this, we are starting a podcast, Split Happens, and we are so excited about this because we all know I've never made it to the altar, but I did have a separation that you did help me with, and it wasn't the divorce, but it was stressful, and so I can only imagine what people that are getting divorced feel. So today's podcast, it's our very first one, we're coming out of the gate strong, is what does divorce mean, essentially? And that sounds like a broad question, but really when you break it down, it's a very genuine answer to that question.
Absolutely, and you know, it's really, how do you win a divorce? And how do you define success? Because it's a very emotional time in everyone's life. And whenever people come to my office when they're either getting divorced or they're going through a contested custody fight or whatever it is, it's not what they dreamed of for their future. You know, when people go to the altar and they're promised happily ever after, they think, well, now it's a guarantee, it's a contract, but really it's just the start of the rest of your life, and you've got a partner who may develop at a different emotional rate than you do, or sure, you know, may not have been totally honest about who they were because they may not have known when you got together, or you may not have known. And there are a whole myriad of reasons why people get divorced. Mm-hmm. And the divorce rate in this country is something like 50%, not to mention all the people like, you know, Katie over here who didn't even make it to the altar.
Hey, and I say that very openly because I think, you know, it affects more people than you know, and why hide it, you know? And I think divorce actually, toward the end of it, because I've known you for a long time and watched you really work, people come out happier, dare I say, when they do it the right way, of course, you know, with the right timing.
You know, we titled this podcast Split Happens because, I mean, it does, right? It's a part of life. And it really should be something that isn't as scary or as insurmountable as people sometimes are afraid that it's going to be, only because most of us in some form or fashion are going to go through it.
Oh yeah, and I think one thing we have talked about just as friends, we go way back, and I just think it's been neat. There's a pyramid sort of, and the top is this heightened emotion, and then every level you kind of come down, that emotion lessens and the facts kind of start to set in. But you want the right lawyer in your corner, which thank God we're friends, I can just call you, I got you on speed dial, number 1 baby. But talk a little bit about that. People come into you, they are heightened, it is the worst day of their life, and then by the time they leave you, they're like, okay, they may have even met somebody else by that point.
Of course it is, and you know, no one comes to a divorce lawyer because they're having a great day. You know, people don't want to have to meet me, and I try not to take that personally, but you know, ultimately, when people are coming to my office, it's because they're at one of the worst or lowest points in their life because it's nowhere they expected to be. And society will tell us it's a failure, or you know, whatever your background is that could play into that, but it doesn't have to be this horrible, awful thing. Mm-hmm. And that's really what I want to educate people on and share my experience with, because you know, there are really 2 reasons. And how do you win a divorce? Well, the number 1 way you win a divorce, and the number 1 way that you win any kind of contested custody fight, is that you come out of it as a better person than you were when it started it. And if you can come out as a better person than your ex, well, now you've doubly won. Yeah. And the other thing, as a lawyer, you know, from my perspective, I don't have your lived experience, I didn't have your relationship, I wasn't there, nor is the judge. And so when I'm giving you advice, I have to couch it in terms of, well, what is the court going to care about, as opposed to what are you feeling emotionally? And it's not because I don't care, or not that it doesn't matter for your life, but because nowhere in Florida Chapter 61, Florida Statute Chapter 61, does it talk about outrage. You know, who's the angriest, who has the bigger, you know, cross to bear, who was the worst behaved. It's just not in there, right? Yeah. And so I can't go to court and sell it. And so what I have to help people understand is, you know, you got to get to a place where you're not looking at this as emotionally, and you're looking at it more objectively, or kind of in a business type setting, but that's not fun, right? Like, no one wants to think about, oh, how can I look at my life objectively?
Yeah.
That's not something that is an easy sell. And so the idea behind Split Happens is, well, how can you, when you start this process and you're in this worst, and you're in the worst or most heightened emotional state you're going to be in, how can you change your perspective and really view it as a starting point for the rest of your life? How can this unanticipated, horrible feeling thing really be the inflection point that's going to give me a better life or the greatest version of my life once it's all over? And that's what I really like to help people to do. And when we've had conversations about just life in general, I find that being able to have that perspective and help people through it is really useful in all facets of life, not just in relationships.
I remember busting in your house. Like, they live down the street. I just busted in. I have a door code. It's fine. Busted in, and I was in my pajamas. I'm like, I'm taking the golf cart. Remember? I came in and I tried to coerce a neighborhood kid to go steal it. Was that right? Probably not. Was it emotionally heightened? Yeah, sure was.
Well, in fairness, I did advise you to get the golf cart, but
not that way. He was like, legally, but I think that's when people come to you, they're kind of like me, they're busting in, they're like really like, heightened, and you are that guiding light. It's sort of like, I'm just gonna say, like, if I pray, I'm like, okay, I'm enraged, take it down. Somebody comes to you enraged, you're able to take it down. You have the tools, you know the laws. You can't do it alone. But when you do it beside somebody that's not only educated, but kind and board certified, just to be honest, that helps.
Yeah, and what most people don't realize, including most lawyers, is that the bounds of advocacy, which are these guiding principles that the Florida Bar has put together for family lawyers to follow, the number one rule is you got to take the temperature down. Our job really is to help people manage their emotional expectations. Now, ask your lawyer if they've read it. If they're not board certified, they probably haven't. But that really is our job. And to do it well, you have to understand what people are going through. You have to meet them where they are when they first come to see you. But then also, you have to give them a pathway forward. You have to help them figure out what it is they want out of the situation, other than just being really, really mad or really, really afraid. Because otherwise, they're just sort of flailing and spinning, and nobody likes that.
Okay, so talk about this, because I was thinking about this morning. So we have stages of grief in life, right? You go through stages of grief. Well, there's stages of divorce. So I think it would be really neat for this viewer to hear, what are kind of the stages? From the time a person comes to you to the time they leave, what do you notice?
They really are the stages of grief. And so, the first emotion almost always is just anger. Because, anger is, at its core, a form of fear.
Oh, yeah.
And so whenever the core human values or your core human beliefs are challenged, you're going to feel afraid. And it's going to manifest in different ways. And your core human values are a sense of security, sense of shelter, well-being of your children. All of those things are getting touched on, and that causes people to really catastrophize or think the worst, and it makes perfect sense. And so, if you view that though as a starting point, whereas if you view it as the worst I'm ever going to feel about this whole process is when it starts, and that every day after that it's going to get better, well, that's how you win. And so, what I do for all of my clients is I give them a homework assignment, and I give them a sheet of paper. Of course, it's a branded notepad because,
as it
hello.
should be. Yeah, I need one of those.
You'll get one, as will our viewers if they ask. I give them this branded Sasso Guerrero and Hinderlight notepad, and I ask them to write down, what do you want to be better about your life next week? What do you want to be better about your life in a month? What do you want to be better about your life in 3 months? And what do you want it to be better in a year? And that helps people really conceptualize what their goals are and what's going to make them feel better about where they are.
Because I think the truth is, we've talked about this. People come in and they're like, I'm going to be homeless. I'm going to be homeless. It is what it is. I'm going to lose the Mercedes. The kids are going to lose the school. You don't always lose everything. It's really moderation, I think, in what I've noticed in working with you and watching you. You really, lifestyles can change, but you're not going to be on the street. People get more scared of anything.
And we're talking about it in terms of a divorce or a family law situation because, split happens, right?
Hello, yeah.
But it really is a life skill. Life is all about perspective. If your perspective is, it's going to result in disaster. And listen, I say this as a person who is always, one misstep away from being broken homeless, because that is how my neurotic mind has always worked. I understand that. The way I've learned to combat it is figuring out, all right, if I'm feeling any type of emotion, whatever it is, what's going to make me feel better about the situation? What tangible thing can I do to really help get to the next step that's not broken homelessness, but it's in fact feeling safe, feeling secure. And so in a family law situation, it can be, all right, what neighborhood do I want to live in after this marriage is over? Do I want to stay in this house? Do I want to go somewhere else? Do I want my kids to stay in the same school? Do I want them to go somewhere else? You know, do I want to pursue another relationship right now? Do I want to figure out who I am? You know, all kinds of things that are really these action steps that are going to make you feel better about where you are. It's going to help manage that anxiety, that fear, and it's also going to give you a roadmap to turn this unexpected thing into really this inflection point that led you to a better life than you had before, which is 100% always possible.
I think the coolest thing in knowing you, and we've talked about this, you know, you got the coolest new office furniture. Remember, I came up to see it, and I was like, your office looks great, but while I'm here, let me ask this question. I said, I feel like a lawyer's goal, when the person comes to you and they're at their lowest, you already know, you've done this so many times, that you're like, the happiest days of that person's life are ahead. And it is so hard to see. But take me as an example. I thought I was done. I was like, I don't know what to do. And I didn't even get divorced. I just got separated. Life gets so much better and calmer and sweeter because of who you surround yourself with. And that was a big part of picking you to help. Well, you know, you're one of my best friends in the world, but part of picking you to help me was huge because I felt so at ease. Like, okay, the happiest days are ahead of me, because you've seen people come through that. And so it's not just something you say. Divorce really does mean, I think, rise up in a way.
It does. And, you know, one of my fears, going back to being neurotic and fearing broken homelessness, when I became a divorce lawyer, was it was going to make me jaded or make it difficult for me to be in a relationship, because you just assume that, you know, this anger or disappointment or you know, bad behavior that people experience in relationships sometimes is contagious. And really the opposite is true, because when you see the patterns that people fall into, or really the background, all the different things that can cause relationships to end, good, bad, or indifferent, it gives you that perspective of, you know, it's normal sometimes. You know, there are some relationships that either were good when they formed, but people changed over time, or you know, we're built on a bit of a rocky foundation, and so that's what caused it to end. Or sometimes people just make really bad, awful decisions for reasons that are almost always based on things they're going through and not the other person. But when trust is gone, the relationship's gone. And so, you know, knowing that, it gives you a lot more confidence to kind of evaluate where you are.
Well, and divorce is sad, but like you said, there's different situations. You've got things like addiction, oh gosh, cheating, but I can't think of the proper words. I'm just gonna say cheating. All these things that happen. So then sometimes divorce is actually, thank God it exists. Because if you were stuck, you'd be so stuck.
Exactly. It's getting past that feeling. And, you know, society, I think, to a certain extent, has planted this seed in a lot of us that we're supposed to be stuck. That, you know, if you're in a bad relationship or a bad marriage, that you're just there because it's what you were taught, or generations before have told you that that's what you need to be. And I'm not trying to get into a moral or a philosophical discussion here, but there are marriages that aren't meant to last.
Right, they grow you in the time that you're in them, and then, you know, you can get divorced. When you wake up and say, I get to do this instead of I have to do this, you're like, I get to live a better life. But that's where we're going to get people with this podcast. We're going to tell them what divorce means. We're going to break it all down. So Jay, before we end, I want you just to think about this and tell us, what does divorce mean in just a couple of sentences that you want people to understand?
Is this my camera?
That's your camera.
All right. Divorce is an opportunity. Divorce is your opportunity to live a better life than you lived before. That is possible for everyone. That has been my experience. So when you come to my office, when you meet with that divorce lawyer, I know how you're feeling. I know it feels scary, but trust me, it can be better. It is going to work out, and you are going to love the life that you get to lead after the relationship is over.
You guys are going to want to follow us along on this podcast journey. I am thrilled about it. We've sat down many a time and really talked before this even came into fruition about wanting to do a podcast for a long time together. Your ideologies and the way that you practice law is so different, and I think that you guys are gonna have fun with us. It's gonna be a good time. I'm a little unhinged. Jay keeps it together. You know, you're a little neurotic, like you said, but I think it benefits well. So we're looking forward to this journey with you guys, and Yeah. We'll
Katie's
see you
got
next
some
time.
life experience that y'all are not going to want to miss.
Yeah.